So, I'm Harold Nelson, and my early background, is that I'm trained as an architect. I'm a licensed architect in California. I worked as an architect for several years. Went to graduate school at Berkeley, of course, and I got to design my own doctorate program. So I designed a doctorate program in the design of social systems. And it was unique at the time, but I think there are other people that have graduated from it since then. I got to pick my own faculty, pick my curriculum, do the whole thing, so I designed it myself. And so since then, I have taught in a variety of universities, in a variety of departments, almost everyone in the university, nearly, all over the world. And I've been on faculty in a few universities. I got to design a graduate department at one point in whole systems design, and I directed that for a little over 10 years. Then most recently, I'm still associated with different universities, and that most recently now I've started my own business formally, not just my architectural practice, but I have an LLC now. Well, the virus kind of interrupted a lot of that, and countries closed down. I used to travel a lot, give presentations, work at universities, visiting professorships and that. But that pretty much folded since the virus. Even my work in the States, I've done a lot of work with a variety of organizations, including military, Stratcom, and Naval Postgraduate School. I taught there for several years. And just been an itinerant designer. I call myself an accidental vagrant, going around, and the consistency is that I try to introduce people to design, at least in its latest sort of manifestation, the one that I'm interested the most in. A publisher would be remiss if I didn't show you The Design Way. That's a book a colleague and I had written, published now second edition at the MIT Press. The Chinese have published it, it turns out. I didn't realize that, but about a year ago they came out with their edition, and the Spanish edition is coming out now this fall. Not aimed at any particular area, domain, just design in general, and we get people from all walks of life, from every part of the globe, who find it interesting. So that's good. That's me in a nutshell. Because I'm a systemic designer, I see the whole archipelago, and I kind of like that metaphor. I use it. There's an archipelago actually in existence. It's a very perfect one, because that one beginning part of the archipelago, it's very old. There's only just small remnants of the old islands that used to be there, atolls and that sort of thing. It goes all the way through to islands that are newer, to an island that still has volcanoes erupting. It's still building itself. And then just offshore, there's an island on the sea bottom that's building. And it's going to be a new island, I don't know, probably after I'm gone, but in a few thousand years, it's going to be a new island. So what I do with the archipelago that I find so useful, there are literally hundreds and hundreds of different approaches to design. And so when people say something design, I often have to find, okay, what is it that you're talking about exactly? What area? So a lot of fields in design are still active, and they're doing quite well. Industrial design, graphic design, that sort of thing, architecture including. So those are all extant islands. Those are different islands that have existed for a long time. They're still happy. The populations are happy. They have their own schools, their own meetings. They do their own thing. So going along, what I'm most interested in now is the newest island that has emerged, the nascent island that I call systemic design, not just me, but other people. And I'm also interested in what might be coming, the incipient island that's going to be emerging soon, that I call advanced design, and that's for another conversation. So right now, I'm interested mostly in the newest island, the Systemic Design Island, and that is the focus there for me and for others on both practice and education, so that universities don't offer many opportunities for designers to practice. And most universities, they have a hard time with professional programs anyway. They're science-based or humanities-based. They're quite happy with those. Design being practice-based, and a lot of the professions are like that. Medicine, law, business. There's always been a kind of an uncomfortable relationship with universities. To be able to begin to develop this idea of what I call scholar practitioner, where you think about what you're doing, which is a good thing, but nowadays there's a split between people who think and people who like to do. People actually brag about, well, I'm just action. I just do stuff. That's not necessarily good, and it's not necessarily good to just sit around and think what back in the architecture days we used to call paper architects. You just do drawings and things. You never do real buildings. That's true for any other organizational design. And so the archipelago, for me, is a really rich sort of notion, and it helps me sort of, instead of talking about the history of design or styles of design or something like that, I can use this archipelago notion of these different islands with certain populations, ecosystems of designers. They can be engineering, they can be graphic, they can be any of the others. Also, the interesting thing about the island metaphor is like Irian Jaya, Papua New Guinea, and the Indonesian political fold. Papua New Guinea has 10% of all the languages in the world. They have on this little island, they have over 850 to 1,000. People differ on it, but 850 to 1,000 different languages. So each village sort of had its own language developed over thousands of years. That's kind of what's happened in the archipelago of design. You can go to the island that's in design science, and they've specialized out and separated out, and they all have their own languages and they're splintered. So it's a rich metaphor because you can kind of remind people there is this incredible diversity, and there's this diversity of approaches. And my use of that notion of the archipelago is I can put myself in a place, my work, in a place and with a certain population of people within an ecosystem. So it works. Some people don't like metaphors, but I love it. Anyway, I think it's a powerful, for me, metaphor for a lot of reasons. So it's a problem. It's also a problem, it turns out, because I have worked a lot in system science and that sort of thing. And it's people who come to design or to systems get imprinted by the first people or the first thing that they have read or that they hear. And that's unfortunate because that's not the whole diverse field. So I would say if you're interested in design, be very aware of the diversity of things out there. And there are a lot of people calling their fields design. And it can actually be planning. Design thinking is actually creative problem solving and not design. But it's become very popular now in business and government now to do creative thinking. And there's training for it and workshops and all sorts of things. But it's not design in any of these other fields. It's creative problem solving. It can be craft, it can be business, it can be method. A lot of people approach design as a method or an algorithm. It can be a political frame, and it can be applied science, planning. So if you're interested in design, it's important to get a sort of understanding of what is it that you're really interested in. Are you interested in creative problem solving? Are you interested in doing planning? Are you interested in et cetera, et cetera? And amongst all of that, there would be these areas that are actually, I would consider design that creates, in an interesting way, design creates reality. So if you're interested in sort of steering evolution, creating reality, disrupting and continuing the world, serving humans, augmenting human beings, then you can begin to focus on what you think is the best area in design to do that. In the military, for instance, there's a lot of diversity, obviously, in what design means to people. Like if you go to STRATCOM, I've worked with the commander's design team. They have a very different perspective on what design is from, for instance, JSOW or something, and that's a very different perspective from the Naval Postgraduate School or any other areas of what design is. So it's sort of wading through all of that, getting as much clarity as you can, because once you're sort of drawn into the rabbit hole, then things get complex in there, and when you're in the war on everything, people, ideas, everything, all are sort of based on what you bought into when you first went into that rabbit hole. So when you decided, okay, it's going to be planning, or it's going to be problem solving, or it's going to be science, or actual design, everything falls from that. So you have to be really careful and aware of what it is that you're buying into. And it's fine, you got to buy into it at some point, but you have to be really careful. So you need some good counseling, mentors, sort of to search around. Don't get intrigued with the first thing that comes across the screen that says design. And say, oh, okay, I can do that. But you might wind up, architecture took me as long to qualify for my license as it does for a medical doctor to get qualified to become an MD. That's a hell of an investment. So you have to be really careful, and you decide, for instance, design is architecture for you. That's true in industrial design, that's true in a lot of other. So it was in the late 60s, 70s, early 70s when I was at Berkeley. There were some very interesting people working on design and systems and trying to combine the two. And they weren't from the same department. They were across campus. And these were the people that I drew from to get my own faculty for my doctoral work. And they were influencing one another, and they were influencing the rest of the world as well. There were a seminar that my mentor would hold. Was quite famous. We show up and you never know who's going to be there. We had Nobel laureates showing up. We had people, the chancellor of the university would show up. Everybody would show up because they all had interests in design and systems. So a lot of great thinking. I don't know if you've heard the idea of wicked problems, Horst Riddle. If you haven't, I highly recommend that you read Horst's original piece. Anyway, there was all this influencing and these great ideas developing amongst these people from very diverse fields, but all with a common interest in design. I didn't realize that was unique until I had left Berkeley, and I discovered that wasn't what was going on in the rest of the world. That was pretty much there, and it diffused after a while as well. But there was this highly influential group, ideas, and that they would influence Europe, Asia, other areas as well, draw other people in, influencing one another. So I called it a bubble. It doesn't have like a boundary. It just had limits of influence and who was influencing who took what, where. And for me, the disappointment is when that bubble started to diffuse, other universities, other areas didn't pick it up. And just taking wicked problems, people starting to use that term all the time. And it turns out they don't really understand what Riddle was talking about. And they've translated it through several generations of not reading his material, but reading what other people have said. So the ideas have gotten lost, and some of the power have gotten lost. We've lost a lot. No, it sounds like an old guy, but a lot of great ideas have gotten left without being really fully explored. They get diluted. So what I'm trying to do with the Berkeley Bubble is to bring back that understanding of what those influences were and who was influenced. That's a long elevator ride, I know, But anyway, that's what it's about. It's talking about that special time when these great thinkers were influencing one another and the rest of the world. This is my floor. I have to get off here. Again, to be congruent with my own preaching, I have to ask what you mean by design thinking. Because before IDEO, people were actually using the term design thinking to not refer to a 5 or 6 step process. And it wasn't creative problem solving. So my experience has been that what the concept of design thinking was originally really got captured and diluted by this notion and popularized by this notion of the IDEO Stanford model of 6 steps, or I forget, 5 or 6 steps of creative problem solving. That creative problem solving model is based on something that was developed in the middle of the last century, creative problem solving. It's good, if you've got a problem that you need to be creative with, that's great, but it's not design, and it's not, in my perspective, it's not design. And so my experience has been, since you lose that term, you can't use it anymore because people immediately default to what they think they know design thinking is, which is creative problem solving. You want to talk about creating reality. You want to talk about augmenting human beings, about all these other things. You have to think of another kind of title to give it. So I use, for instance, design inquiry instead of design thinking. Because people can't assume then, oh yeah, I know what that is. You can't assume that. So anyway, that's my experience. It's good work. It was good work a century ago, whatever. Important work. But it's not design in the way I understand design. It's good problem solving, creative problem solving. But as Horst Riddles pointed out, there's a problem with problems, and his wicked problems was trying to point that out. Still, 99% of everybody's justifications for taking action are based on problems. They start thinking about taking action based on what they think is a problem. That's a problem. I guess the examples, for me, I've got an opportunity to design everything from policies to coursework, really design it, to graduate programs, to universities. So that's been an incredible, good experience. I've got to work. I had a very good friend who worked and was very influential in the United Nations. And he was also on my committee. He was a psychiatrist, not because I needed help, but he was there to help me with systems, health system. He started this program called Healthy Cities, and he had this kind of kernel of an idea, and it's now the largest program in the United Nations. It's got more countries that are involved with Healthy Cities in the Southern Hemisphere than in the Northern Hemisphere. It's hugely successful, totally diverse. Everybody's doing something different based on this kernel of a design idea about what a healthy city is. So those are some examples. Of course, it's an emergent field, and pretty much the older traditions of design hold sway in business, and even the newer ones, like design thinking, they kind of dominate the press. They kind of dominate everybody's thinking about what design is. So to do systemic design or something that's more involved, it's difficult because people assume, and they're not going to invite you in to disrupt their assumptions. They sort of want to go with what they know and what their expectations are. So what excites me about the future comes out of really bad times right now, but because of the virus and other things now, it's really disrupted the way people live, work, what their expectations are. So old norms have been broken. We need new norms put in place. We need and this is where the design approach comes in. People will try to guess at what the future is going to be like, and I read a lot about, well, what is the new norm that's going to emerge around work, life, or around health, or around this. And in design, you say, what do we want? What do we want those new norms to be? What's desirable? And that's the exciting part right now, is there's this opportunity, we're at an inflection point, forced, in this case, to sort of look new at what we've been doing. It would have been impossible just a couple of years ago to tell people that think about how you work. You can work from home, okay? You can work remotely. You can go to school remotely. And it was very, very difficult, trust me, to have any of those conversations. And now it's like people, okay, what's desirable? I want to know what a balanced work life looks like, what an education looks like. So that's exciting. It's just if we choose to say, what do we desire, rather than sort of drift into the future and bump into things and say, oh, God, I have to adapt and I have to, adjust to it. And I have to, instead of sort of steering into a desired future, saying, this is what we want, this is what we're going to do. That's the cautionary piece. So in part, although it's not entirely matched in time scale, in part, I have been working with some people on the design of a new design school. That, for me, is really exciting because things have really dramatically changed. And we have, I don't know if it's like this where you are, but global warming has really hit us. I'm out here in the West under this heat dome, and you can't go outside, and you eat the air now. You don't breathe it. It's so full of smoke and everything, and it's so unseasonably hot. And the fires around us are frightening to a lot of people and very destructive. So we're in this new era. Even the geologists and people started to talk about this new era of the Anthropocene. We're in an era now, an age, where scientists can't find natural systems to study. There are no systems that haven't been influenced, some of them dramatically, by human activity. And people now are sort of saying, okay, if we have that kind of an effect, maybe we ought to think about what we're doing, instead of just drifting into the future or colliding with the future, backing into the future because we're afraid of something that's here now. Turn around and advance into the future, steer where we want to go, decide what we want to do. So that's an exciting piece. And, of course, I'm writing another book and things that try to sort of promote that, talk with people about what design thinking, design inquiry really does. With the colleagues, I make this case, design is a third culture. It's different from science. It's different from the humanities. It has its own traditions, its own postulates. It's different. And if we want to steer into the future, advance into the future, then we have to be able to use design and design inquiry. Litany of what I had said, that it's problem solving, planning, applied science, all of those things. Those are the things that I think are misconceptions that people have, or that they're drawing, or that it's Post-it notes on a workshop for 2 days. And people think that's what design is in all these areas. Okay, that's fine, but I don't think it's going to, that matches the kind of challenges that we have. The world is way more complicated than we thought, more complex than we thought, more dynamic than we had imagined. And I use another metaphor of flying, is that it's as challenging as flying a high-performance aircraft. Nobody's going to give you the keys to the jet because you went to a weekend workshop on design thinking. It's not going to happen. You have to do a lot of training just to fly a little single-engine plane, a little 180 Cessna. You're going to have a lot of training for that. Same as with design. There's a big investment that we have to make in learning how to design in complexity, complex environments. People are expecting agency to be more fair, just, equitable, They want some accountability in what change agents are doing and what the results are. So that's all a huge challenge. Designing is like laying track for a moving train while you're on board. So to do that, think about what you need to be able to do, because that's exactly, things are in motion. Things are in motion. We don't get a clean slate when we start to design. It's a lot of complexity. We have to know what direction we want to go in. That's be a good thing to know if you're laying track under duress. What direction are we going in? What do we think we're going to see along the way that's going to tell us we're on the right track? Staying with the metaphor. So it's like design is also creates ultimate particulars. It creates particulars. And 90% of our education or more is focused on universals and generalized knowledge and statistics and all the rest of it. And that's not what design does. Design creates an ultimate particular experience or thing that is unique in and amongst itself. And it can become copied in that, so it's more generalized. But it's context dependent. It's not independent, like science is independent of context. Design is very context dependent. So there's all those things that are involved in successfully now engaging with the world rather than a little more destructively or whatever we've been doing in the past. And a lot depends on it. Our safety, security, health, well-being, all those things depend on us being good at designing complex systems, complex social systems and environmental systems. Berkeley chancellor was on my committee, and of course, like I said, it was a unique program. You had to make a case to the academic senate that what you're interested in didn't fit into any department in the university, so you had to make your own. So you had to go through this huge effort to get accepted and to do the work. So the chancellor told me, he says, Harold, that was a great thing, exciting thing that you've been able to accomplish in getting this approved. It's really going to be exciting, and it's the worst thing you've ever done. Because when you graduate, there's going to be no old boys networks there to make sure you get jobs, that you get placed, because you don't fit into somebody's silo or into somebody's specialization. And he said, that's going to be a huge problem. Guess what? He was right. It's a huge problem. Talk to people at universities, cocktail parties, wherever. They said, what do you do? Systemic design. Oh, yeah. Well, I'm an architect. Oh, yeah. Suddenly they know who you are because you've got a category and you're labeled. So without that, nobody appreciates this sort of accidental vagrant notion. What's that? That sounds like it's a bad thing. Are you homeless or something? Well, no. It actually means that you work with a variety of people. So that's a huge challenge that we just don't, at least in the Western tradition, in the U.S. and that, we're pretty much wedded to our categories. And there's an interesting piece that was influential for me that somebody had written several years ago, for the military actually. The difference between thinking between the Occidental and Oriental traditions. And it's like the notion that our habits, and every meeting you sit down in, you'll see the habits coming. Somebody says, take a look at this in the organizations. Everybody approaches it as a disassembly of the parts. How do you take the parts, categorize it? So, as I'm in the West, I've been involved with horses for most of my life. So I said, describing a horse. There's the pieces and parts of a horse, and, here's the mane and tail and withers and all of this. That's our tradition in the West, is how do you sort of put everything in a category. The Eastern tradition, when they describe a horse, they'll describe it in its pasture mates, what's the vegetation it's with. So they describe a kind of an environment that it's in, a whole environment. So the habits that we have here really sort of make it difficult to think about systemic design when you're trying to imagine how does something come together? What does it look like as a whole? What are the emergent qualities? All those other things. That doesn't fit into a university program, trust me. That does not fit into the mentality of a lot of my academic colleagues or my professional colleagues. So the habit is to disassemble, take things apart, and gain understanding through specialization, deeper understanding. You see that. You know that probably in your own background. Military is great in disassembling people, putting them into specializations and separating them, admonishing you to stay in your lane and things like that. Old age, I survived. I feel like designing the graduate programs that were very successful. So I feel very good about that, about influencing some of the ideas in that people have about design. Even the younger generation, been able to influence some of them. The book that Eric and I wrote on the design has been influential. I would like to have had the ideas have more influence than they have. People stop talking all the time about problem solving as if that's whole life was just facing problems instead of thinking about what we would desire to have in the future. Haven't succeeded so well in that, but at least I've got to maybe even for a short minute at a time have people think about their approaches, their habits. I mean, one of the things, like in the military, situational awareness is a huge thing, and they train people in situational awareness. On the other hand, when you're working with people, you find out they're not aware at all about their beliefs and their assumptions and their assertions and all of that. They just, that's all, they don't look, with any kind of mindedness. Why do I think? What are my biases? What are all those things that I've got in my head? It's all out there. I'm supposed to do that out there. I'm going to go out there. There's a method out there. There's an approach out. It's all objective. So I would like to have seen that begin to balance a little bit more, that people would become more self-reflective, thoughtful, prepare in a different kind of way, what kind of stance they had, what kind of approach that they were using, and then have the skills and abilities to actually do something. Be skilled creating desired change. Well, we can't control everything, and if we're not smart about what we're doing in this complex, complicated world, we pay a huge price. Huge. I mean, death toll on that is just staggering, and it didn't have to be as big as it was. And it's even going from simple approaches to appreciating more rational scientific knowledge, things like that. Learned more than I wanted to about my fellow people, how they think or don't think. I don't assume now anymore that you're going to make a case because it's a good idea. That's been dissuaded. It's like, okay, that's not going to work. You can have good ideas, but it doesn't mean that they're going to win the day at all. The value of life. The people have just lost a few friends and family members to COVID. Nobody close yet, but still, the value of life. And if you don't take these things seriously, there are consequences. And it's not just a matter of everybody can have their opinion and everybody can do whatever they want to. They have consequences. We're interrelated, not isolated. That was the thing that struck me most, is people who don't think they're interrelated. From a systemic perspective, that's startling. You don't think you have an effect on other people and they have an effect on you. There's no relationship. No, I'm just an island unto myself. I have nothing to do with anybody. So it revealed a lot, and the consequences are there. And unfortunately, for a lot of people, that doesn't seem to mean anything, which is another learning. What am I missing, I guess, in all of this? But it was a sobering experience. Plus, I got bored as hell being inside all the time, scuttling around trying to buy food and everything. And I feel really bad for my daughters and the other younger generations who lost opportunities. That's a hell of a price to pay for us not being more careful in what we're doing. And that was a genuine challenge. That was a problem. a wicked problem, and I think we mishandled it. I won't name names, but we mishandled a lot of that globally, and are still mishandling it. So, yeah, it was a lesson learned, but it's like somebody said, you get the test, and then you get the lesson. That's the way nature works. You get the test, you have to take the test, and then you get the lesson. And that's sort of what we've done. Who's going to take it seriously? Next generation. We screwed it up, so next generation. You're up.